So when we want to talk about the impacts, this is how it works. सबसे पहले तो you have direct tax, and we've spoken about direct tax, that direct taxes are like income taxes and all. So direct taxes are income tax based on goods के ऊपर, and how does it impact consumers, producers and stuff. What we'll do is we're going to show it on the diagram as to how it impacts things. So basically what's happening is, this is like the demand and the supply. This is the consumer surplus, and this area represents the producer ka surplus. So what we have over here is the impact of taxation. When direct tax is implemented, the demand goes down. We say consumer ka purchasing power goes down, so as a result their living standards and ability to consume will go down. Consumer surplus will fall. You can see that in the diagram. Producers revenue will fall. Producers surplus will fall. Government revenues will not fall. Actually, it is going to go up. Government revenue will rise because they're getting more money in taxes. Economy will slow down because of taxation, will slow down because spending will fall. Sometimes government actually uses this policy to slow down the economy if it's going too fast and the inflation is going up. So inflation will slow or even deflation may occur. Unemployment may rise because of the slowing down of the economy. Unemployment may rise. So when we talk about indirect taxes, we say these are the taxes imposed on goods and services, and it raises the cost of production. Okay, so I'm making a little inelastic demand curve for a particular reason, and I'll that will be evident in just a bit. Lekin my demand curve is slightly more steeper. Now, when an indirect tax is applied, the cost of production rises by the tax rate. So what we've studied in unit number 2 is that as a result of indirect taxes, the supply curve jumps up by the tax rate. तो उसकी वजह से क्या होता है कि क्वांटिटी में रिडक्शन आता है और प्राइस में इंक्रीज आता है, एंड वर्टिकल डिस्टेंस टैक्स रेट होता है, और ये वाला जो एरिया है ये गवर्नमेंट का कंज्यूमर बर्डन और ये प्रोड्यूसर बर्डन था. Write the whole things. If you don't remember what they are, you write this is consumer burden, and this little small lower portion is producer burden. So how does it affect? Number one, consumer pays higher price and consumes lower quantity. दूसरा, कंज्यूमर का सरप्लस फॉल्स. Number 3, tax burden on consumer depends on the elasticity of demand and supply. It depends on the elasticity. Inelastic demand, consumer pays more. Elastic demand, consumer pays less in taxes. Similarly, if supply is elastic, producer pays less burden. If supply is inelastic, producer pays more. So that's how that would work. Number 4, for producer, unfortunately for producer, revenue we say falls. वैसे तो प्रोड्यूसर का रेवेन्यू इज डिपेंडेंट, प्रॉफिट्स माइट गो डाउन, लेकिन जो प्रोड्यूसर का रेवेन्यू है माइनस द टैक्सेस विल डेफिनेटली गो डाउन. प्रोड्यूसर का सरप्लस, अगेन प्रोड्यूसर सरप्लस इज गोइंग टू गो डाउन. And government revenue will rise. Some will be coming from the consumers, some will be coming from the producers. As far as the economy goes, for economy the same thing happens. There is a slowdown. It can cause inflation if it's a key raw material or something. It causes unemployment to happen. The last thing about fiscal policy, I'll call it fiscal policy stance. Stance matlab ki what is the government's position on the fiscal policy? What are they going for? Are they going for an expansionary fiscal policy? Or are they going for a contractionary fiscal policy? Okay. Now, what does it really mean? Expansionary fiscal policy. What does it mean? Expansionary. Expansion ka matlab hai to make something big. What expansionary means is that you want I'll use the word aggregate for now, aggregate demand or total demand. You want the aggregate demand to rise. Okay, you want the aggregate demand to rise, and when aggregate demand rises, it causes GDP to rise, it causes employment to rise. Okay, economy grows big. Following? So what do you do? Well, we said fiscal policy में दो चीजें हैं, government spending and taxes. If you want the economy to grow in size, you want to increase government spending and you want to decrease taxation. And something's going to happen as a result of this. What's going to happen is aggregate demand will increase, and it will cause these three things to happen. Mainly these three things to happen. Number 1, economic growth will go up. Number 2, employment will rise. And number three, inflation will start to go up. Now, whether this is a good thing or a bad, it depends कि economy के अंदर inflation slow and steady rise हो रही है या fast and increasing rise हो रही है. So, this is what an expansionary policy is likely to do in the economy. On the other hand, so in terms of the contractionary fiscal policy, again, the two things we have in fiscal policy is government spending and taxes. Contractionary के अंदर you're aiming to reduce the aggregate demand. You don't want people buying so much stuff. You want them to reduce their consumption. So in order to achieve this, आपने डिमांड को कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करना है, आपने इकोनॉमी को स्लो डाउन करना है, तो आप नहीं चाहते कि गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग ज़्यादा हो. You're going to tell the government is going to stop spending so much on infrastructure for cement and steel and goods and services, and plus they're going to start taxing their people more. So as a result of this, they are able to reduce the aggregate demand, and as a result, three things happen. Your economic growth, it goes down. Your employment in the economy of resources, that even moves down. And lastly, in terms of inflation, number three, there is a likelihood that deflation might take place or the inflation will slow down. Opposite of what the expansionary policy is meant to do. And this is how we've studied, these are your macroeconomic objectives, and through these policies you can actually achieve the macroeconomic objectives you are aiming for. We will discuss a little bit about monetary policy stance. It's there already in the macroeconomic objective of controlling inflation. So there are two stances that you can have, the central bank can have. One is, we call it a expansionary monetary policy. And to remind you, monetary policy has two things in it. One is the amount of money in circulation, money supply, coins, notes, and deposits. And number two is the cost of borrowing, which is the interest rate. You should be able to define as how money supply, which is to do with credit availability, and interest rate, which is about the cost of borrowing. For an expansionary policy, you want money supply to rise and interest rate to fall down so that people borrow more. And when that happens, aggregate demand tends to increase, causing three effects to take place. One, the economic growth will go up. Number two, the employment will rise. Economic growth and employment has a direct relationship. And number three, inflation might occur, but whether it's good or bad depends on the size of inflation. Next, what we have is contractionary monetary policy. Again, why do we do this? Government, when it feels the economy is exhausting too fast and inflation is rising too much, so the government feels that the money supply should be reduced and the interest rate should be increased, resulting in aggregate demand to go down and causing its three effects, which is economic growth goes down, number two, employment will go down, and lastly, deflation will take place.